Okay, so how do you think social media factors into our mental health? We've already kind of touched on that, so maybe we'll speed through this one. But
Um, yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else to add there. I think it gives the illusion of connection, but it's a
mm,
very affinity-based connection and not a person-based
yeah,
connection. That someone's value becomes what they offer to me or what connection point I share with them as far as like a shared interest, as opposed to uh, them being of value because they are loved by God and made in the image of God and different from me, but we also still can be friends and value one another. I think also it makes us feel isolated because it puts us in silos, where we get fed information that just uh, feeds our own biases and
hmm,
then leads us to lack nuance and the ability to have conversation with people who we disagree with. And
yeah,
um, if you haven't realized, and every time you talk about mental health, there are going to be people who disagree.
right. Yeah, and I think even with that connective piece of it's tempting to go online to find connection
Hmm.
when you know like you can be connected to any number of people that are going to agree with you because you can find that online versus like going to someone in person because we have to have the in-person
Mm-hmm.
connection and real person touch and all of the things that go along with feeling connected and um like I wonder how often we are looking to technology or social media to fill a void that
Mm-hmm.
isn't that it can't fill.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think often.
okay, so how do you think our culture's values of consumerism and individualism play into mental health?
Not well. We'll just end it with that. So consumerism on a broad scale, I'll just make sure I'm understanding the way I think what you're meaning, and so that everyone listening does too. Consumerism meaning if I have more, then I will feel or be better. Like the desire to just like consume to get more things or more whatever.
Yes, it's not necessarily I don't know that it necessarily has to be tied to like to feel better, but
Sure.
we live in I mean, I've mentioned it several times, constantly advertised
Yeah.
society that says, here's a void that you have and you need to fill it by purchasing. Like our entire economy is based on us
Mm-hmm.
buying more things and us, not just consumerism as in money, but also like every way that that plays into our mentality of I don't have, so I need,
Mm-hmm.
and like the costs that comes with that.
Yeah.
In addition to Spot the Spaceman, we also have Spot Archie.
Spot Archie. So I think consumerism affects us in the sense of if I have this, then this will happen for me. And so if I get the right care, then all my pain will go away.
Mm,
If I have the right friends, then I will never feel lonely again.
mm,
And so, while I think it's good to pursue good friends, I think it's good to pursue right care. I think at some point this also leads to the FOBO thing that you were mentioning earlier, fear better options. That at some point, if I'm constantly thinking I need this, then this, when the thing that I thought would give me this does not, then I need something more. And so if my friends now cease to, for whatever reason, make me feel good all the time, then I must need new friends.
ugh,
As opposed to like before, old school was like, you the people I got, like it or not, we're family.
yeah.
And that's not to say that there aren't times that cut ties and that, all that's a whole separate conversation. But um, my point is too, like, we also, with that instant gratification meets consumerism thing, we also lack the ability to stick it out when like therapy moves from initial helpful to like, oh, is it helpful now? which sometimes you need to take a break, or it's not meant for you in that season, to like just the, I don't know, uncomfort and it leads to not always great things, and it makes other people also the product to us as opposed to people. And so people become something that fulfills this void or this need that I need, as opposed to becoming someone who is of worth and value and dignity. So if they're not providing this for me, then that's not good. It doesn't matter what I'm providing for them,
Wow.
or what we provide to each other, or what we provide to the world, or just the fact that we are here together, which
Yeah.
ought to be enough. You become the product. And that becomes true in all sorts of things. It becomes true in jobs, in ministry. It becomes true, like, if people in church are not people made in the image of God, they become people who are just there to like satisfy a number quota. And they become self-servient to you, or subservient to you. So consumerism, bad. I feel more confident on that one. Individualism has some good tints, that every individual is worthy of dignity and value and respect, and has like a unique calling and gift set and like personality and like all that stuff. Like that's really good. The negative side, I think, leads us to loneliness as well. That community also becomes a way of serving the individual, primarily, as opposed to us existing together. And true community, there will be times when you give more than you receive, and there'll be times that you receive more than you give. And if you want true community, I think you have to be willing to venture into all of that. And that takes time and uncomfort and all those things.
Man, that's hitting home really hard. Because I'm like, I think it is so ingrained that it's like, wow, even you just naming that, I'm like, oh gosh, I'm gonna go have to sit with that for a while and ponder where I'm doing that in my own life, to be honest.
Right.
But it's so true, because it's like I know like the pressure I put on myself when I have something at my house, or I'm in charge of X, Y, or Z event, and like how much I feel like I have to be that product to entertain my guests, or to entertain or make sure everyone is happy, having a good time, entertained, fill in the blank. Like, now that you're saying that, I'm realizing like, oh my gosh, yes, it's not enough. If there's which this happens all the time, but like when you come away from a social engagement and you're like, oh no, we were kind of bored, or, that becomes bad, that it's not enough to just, what? Like me and my friends were just hanging out and it was really chill, and there was no agenda or expectation or even like item that we were doing, or so and so got too competitive in the game, or those things all of a sudden become like the end all be all,
Yeah.
instead of like, whatever, we're all human, and like, yes, there's gonna be messiness every time we're together, but like that's also a really good thing, and you have to take all of it.
Yes.
So yeah. Woo. Yeah, individualism. As you were talking about that, I was thinking about that same like all or nothing kind of mentality that we talked about at the beginning, of just like, we can't do all or nothing with individualism without sacrificing something. And I think the sacrifice is our connection to others.
Wow. What if we sacrifice community on the altar of the self,
I honestly think we do a lot of
and
times.
sacrifice intimacy with God on the altar of the self? Because of the self. Because I mean, if God is the other, and I'm so consumed with me, we very easily entirely miss God, because God is going to do things that are different than I would do them. And he's going to say things that are different than I would say them. And if I'm only looking to God to give me things, then I miss him for who he is. And if not entirely, at least a huge portion of who he is. And I think that's one of the reasons repentance is so important too.
Gosh,
And
what a terrible way to view life, though. Like, what can I get out of this? But that's how we're taught to do it.
yeah, you can be whatever you want to be. You can do whatever you want to do. pull yourself up by your own bootstraps if you work hard. I mean, I get advertised those like get rich quick schemes all the time. Probably because I'm would love one of them to work if I ever tried one.
Wouldn't we all? That's why they're there, you
That's why they're
know?
there. Yeah, but we go to that spiritually too, and
Oh,
with mental
yeah.
health and faith and community too. Like, do this and you have this experience, and bam, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
And like maybe you'll get like a taste of it quickly, but it's over a long period of time, and it has its ebbs and flows. Like I think of my relationship with my wife. Like first time you hold hands like with somebody, it's like, oh wow, this is really like sweet, and like I get like a tingle or whatever. But over time, it just becomes more normal.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also really really beautiful. And like first started dating, it's like, oh no, there's silence. Like this is a little awkward. And then you're married, and you like, oh man, I love when we have a night at home and we don't have to talk. That sounds awful.
So different than me. I would
um,
never be okay with that, but
we sit a lot in silence with each other,
sure.
um, and are just like existing with one another. And I love that.
I know what you mean, but that was just so funny how you put that.
It was. I've phrased that really terribly.
It's really great when I don't have to engage with you. Just kidding. Um, yeah,
Man, we hit on a lot.
we did. Um, yeah, this might have to be split into 2 episodes. I don't know. We'll see once I'm editing.
Yeah.
But we're trying to keep our episodes shorter now. But we have a couple more questions. So how has the church approached the topic of mental health in your experience? And this is something we've touched on before, but I think we'd be remiss to like not talk about that facet
Yeah.
since.
Yeah. I think it depends on your upbringing and cultural heritage. So I will speak to my particular one in white evangelical spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Spaces is even too broad. We overgeneralize. And in my particular space, it was more akin to like, don't trust your emotions, trust
Right.
thought. The good of that was it taught me to go and check things with scripture and like check things with reason and others. I don't know that I had like a healthy process for like lament and for that type of like intimacy with God. And I think I felt a pressure to be a certain type of man that I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly one who was like strong, like football, like working at like into all the macho things, and not as sensitive as I have been, and not like chick flicks as much. I don't know that I can even say that anymore. Romantic comedies, as much as I did. Uh, and so I think that was kind of a negative thing. I think now it's becoming more of a cultural hot topic. So a lot of people are talking about it, and some are talking about it well. Other people still talk about it in a sort of vein that's pretty prosperity gospel. That like if you trust Jesus enough, you have enough faith, you'll be able to transcend this pain and then
Mm-hmm.
tap into this like thing that now all of a sudden you feel better. So you've got that side. You've also got people talk about it from just a very small not small perspective is the wrong word. Small time frame, circumstantial, seasonal depression, grief, anxiety, where like depression clinically can be as little as 2 weeks, which anybody who has the experiences, obviously it's good to share and talk about it and be open. But the negative part is also when you start to overgeneralize a very specific experience with it. So if someone's experienced depression for like 2 weeks and now as a pastor, they are broadcasting how they overcame their 2 week depression, that's very, very different than someone who has like childhood trauma, or who has like had depression like their entire life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see that movement right now that's like over becoming uber specific when they need to be a little bit more general and nuanced. I see that movement going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of what I hope our podcast does, is offers a little more nuance and
Yeah. Yeah,
balance.
I think I was thinking like sometimes I feel like in circles that I've been in, like some language has been established surrounding like the acknowledgement of mental health. But there's not, it doesn't seem like there's a real depth or understanding of how that plays out in people's
Mm,
lives. Because it's not just enough to acknowledge that it exists. It's like, how do we interact and be empathizers with those walking through hardships of all kinds? And so one of those being every single person's mental health, because we all have mental health
Yeah.
and mental health issues, because we're human and our minds need work just like the rest of us do.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they come with, its own baggage and complexities and ways that it's understood, things that have happened to it, and all of those things. And so, I think, yeah, kind of along with that, I had written down like overly simplistic Bible band-aids or trite phrases, and also bad advice. Like, I think a lot of times those things have been offered, not only to me, but to other people I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
I think I mentioned this last week, but sort of this idea of like, well, if you just clean your house, like you're gonna have, which maybe this isn't necessarily the church, but
Sure.
if you don't clean your house, then you're gonna have anxiety. Like, just this lack of understanding of like, that's more of a symptom, not like a driver for your anxiety.
Sure.
And like, even being able to acknowledge the anxiety that's happening in you. Like, I think
Mm-hmm.
we all struggle with a lot of these things, but we just don't maybe have the language for it, or aren't recognizing like, oh, when I'm really antsy and I can't stop shaking my leg in a situation, like that might be an indicator that something's
Yeah,
making me
sure.
anxious, So,
Yeah.
yeah, which, we had a whole season last season about talking about how these things are actually in the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
and things that Jesus experienced himself with emotions, and how to interact with those. And if we know that he was perfect, then like, how do we learn from his example with those things? I think that's not often something we're talking about in the church, is the different facets that we see.
Yeah. I will say I am presently, and maybe it's just also based on who I'm following now, I am encouraged. I think there's a good movement towards more holistically talking about it, because a couple years ago, when I was really in the throes of depression and realized I had been kind of like struggled with it my whole life, I didn't know any other like particularly male voices, like trusted Christian voices that I looked to that were open
Yeah.
about that. I actually found comfort in Charles Spurgeon, actually, in a book written about him. He struggled with depression like most of his life, or a lot of it, and like cripplingly so. That was really helpful for me to just see it
Yeah.
in somebody else.
Yeah. It's not a new problem.
No.
And Charles Spurgeon is one of the most referenced theologians today, for
Yeah,
those of who might not be familiar with that
like
name. But
potentially one of the most famous preachers like in that period of time.
yeah. So, yeah, that's not to say that like some churches aren't doing it well, or like that
Mm-hmm.
some people of faith aren't doing it well. That's not at all what I mean. I'm just,
Oh yeah, for sure.
in general, how are we interacting with
Mm-hmm.
this? So, okay, so my last question is, how can we overcome or counteract, is probably a better word, some of these obstacles?
I think probably most obvious, I say most obvious, most practical way will be one of the things that we're going to include in this season of our podcast is going into some spiritual practices that will be helpful for you in your journey of faith. It may already be part of your journey, but I think they can have some really particular helpful things for your mental health as well. So one would be like a practice of prayer, prayer of lament, a practice of like of Sabbath can be really uncomfortable at first, but can actually be really good because it reminds you you're a human being and not a human doing. Practices that grow you in patience can be very uncomfortable, but can make other seasons that are like feel like long suffering more bearable because you've been stretching that muscle already of patience. And I think it's hard to know like how to counteract it too. I think the first step is noticing
Mm-hmm.
Like if any of the stuff that we've mentioned in this episode has been like, ooh, I do that, or like, ooh, I do go to my phone really quickly. Take the step and notice it. Fasting, for example, can be a practice to grow you in like self-control and also in patience. And so, for example, like for this is an example with food, not with social media, but one of the things that happens with fasting over time is you move from like I'm hungry and I'm already grabbing food and I'm putting it in my mouth to I'm hungry. Oh, I could eat. And so the recognition of like, oh, I want to pick up my phone to I'm picking up my phone is great progress. To change that from the I'm bored and before I know at it, I'm like scrolling on my Instagram and been on here for
Mm-hmm.
6 minutes and like, how did I get here?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's some really practical stuff that we'll dive into more in this season.
Yeah. I just want to clarify the word lament that's been thrown out a couple
Yeah,
times
thank you.
is talking to God about the evil you see around you. So it's taking the things that grieve you or make you angry to the one who has something to do, or who has the power to do something about it, is what
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
Um so that's just what we mean when we say
yeah,
lament.
thank you.
But also, yes, I think having conversations around it is really important.
Mm.
And so like just even talking to your friends about like, hey, like, do you notice these things, or like how do you, even a conversation similar to what we're having today, like
Yeah.
talk to people about it, because the more you talk about something, the more you're going to think about it
Mm-hmm.
when you're not with your friend, or having these ongoing conversations. I think helps us kind of with accountability of knowing like maybe where do I need to draw some boundaries with this, or
Mm.
maybe just acknowledging that, hey, yeah, this is having some kind of an influence on me
Mm.
that I don't necessarily love. I think other things can be just practicing putting your phone down for a period of time, or turning off all technology for a period of time. And I would say start really small with that, and then so that it can be something that's sustainable for you.
Or just break it. Break your phone. I'm just kidding. Not
I,
entirely
I
kidding.
have known people that have, well, I haven't known them. I've known someone who has literally just gotten rid of it and gotten a home phone again.
Oh, cool.
Just to,
That's so cool.
right? It's so foreign to us now, um, but more practically, things like, okay, for dinner tonight, I'm not going to have anything on, and
Mm.
I'm going to, really, not watch TV, not have my phone, and or like put my phone by in this specific
Mm-hmm.
place at night, or those type of things that kind of draw some
Uh-huh.
boundaries and help you to master the thing, not have the thing master you.
Yeah. Yeah. One last thing I'd add to, I think if you are struggling with anything mental health related, or even if you don't think you are, be vulnerable with somebody
Mm-hmm.
in your life. Like, and it's easy for me to talk about an issue or to be very selectively vulnerable with what I share, especially with just like what I do now for a living. But to like actually take that uncomfortable step of sharing something in your life that is vulnerable with someone else who you feel like you can trust. And sometimes you have to test the waters on that. But yeah, I think
Mm-hmm.
that's really, really key to combat the culture of individualism too, is like that you
Mm-hmm.
share vulnerably with somebody.
Yeah, and I think even a step before that, like making sure you're scheduling time with other people
Mm.
face to face.
Yeah, that's practical. Yeah.
Yeah, like ask, I know that can feel intimidating and vulnerable to take that step. Like, does this person even want to hang out with me? Just challenge yourself and be courageous and take the step of saying, hey, do you want to get coffee? Do you want to go to this show with me? Do you want to grab dinner? Whatever the thing is, like making sure that we're looking at our physical calendar and making
Mm.
sure I'm having these physical touch points with people. Um,
Because thinking about it practically, our calendars get if we're not careful, our calendars get auto-populated by social media and Netflix and any other streaming service,
Yeah.
and not with the things that we find of utmost value. And what we're saying, just so you hear it clearly, again and again, is not that Netflix or social media are inherently bad, but what is bad is that we are letting these things auto-populate our calendars, or we're auto-populating our calendars with them without even thinking
Mm-hmm.
about it. And is that even what you want?
Yeah. And sometimes it really is hard not to cancel on a plan and just say, I want to stay home by myself tonight. And there's a time and a place for those things, but making sure you're challenging yourself, like, because a lot of times it's just that initial, like, I just don't want to get in my car right now. And then once you're there, you're so glad that you did.
Hmm.
Um, and being okay with like the experience not having to be the most exciting experience you've ever had. But
Yeah, it probably won't be.
yeah, but you might have some fun or you might have some awkward parts, but even those are valuable. So I think, yeah, I think
Hmm.
that's what I would say for counteracting. It's obviously not going to fix everything, but I think we have to take small steps regardless of where we are in life.
Mm-hmm.
And then those things will become more familiar to us and become more things that we're not having to think so much about.
Mm-hmm.
So, any lasting thoughts or
Yeah, I guess just as we wrap up, I'll just say what we got coming up the next 2 weeks. We are going to be talking about.
nope?
Never mind.
Just kidding. It sounded like you were asking permission. Yes,
We
that's a
okay.
great idea.
We are going to be next week. We're going to talk about prayer. Our church is focusing in on prayer this month, and so we're going to talk about prayer as a practice that we think will be really helpful for you, and we found to be helpful in our lives, particularly pertains to mental health. That'll be kind of the angle we take. And then the following week, I'm really excited. We're going to do an interview with my friend Jesse Lusko, who is a pastor and church planter in Portland, and he's going to share Portland, Oregon, to be clear, and share some of his experience with mental health and what he's learned about God in the process. And I think you'll be blessed by that conversation. Really looking forward to it.
Yay. See you next time.